Welcome to Above and Below, the podcast of the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. I am Sonya Bohmann, the Executive Director, and today I have Zulq Malik with me, my co-host, and of course, our friend Stuart. Zulq, why don't you do an intro, please?
Absolutely. I'm Zulq Malik. I'm obviously Sonia's co-host. I'm representing the above part of CIASP up here in Canada. I've been in the construction ecosystem for about 30 years, different capacities. Started off my career as an engineer, owned my own general contracting company, and then I was bored. Also had my own self-performing electrical, mechanical, and civil division. So really acclimated with what the construction industry is about. But before I go on, Sonia, did you do something with your hair that's different?
Every time, Zulq, every
Thank
time.
you. It looks great. It looks ravishing. And I guess we're being joined by Stuart Binstock.
Who
Welcome.
has great hair also. We should talk about that.
Great hair or gray hair?
Both.
Both.
There you go. Thank you very much. Yes, I have been told for my age I do have a good set of hair, so thank you very much.
Ew.
And
Mazel tov.
maybe I owe it to you, Zulq, as a matter of fact. You may not know this, Zulq, but I grew up 20 miles from Canada. I grew up in Watertown, New York.
Oh, nice.
And we used to go to Canada for dinner sometimes. So
Food's better.
that was a different day and age.
Was
Different
it?
time.
When
I
you were
think-
younger? Less.
But the North Country maybe is what helped me grow my hair successfully.
Yeah, because if you get to the city, you end up with this.
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Well, welcome for being here, Stuart. And you know what? Maybe you can tell everyone a little bit about yourself. Who's Stuart Binstock and why are you here? Why are you part of the board?
Why does it matter? Why does this conversation matter, too?
Does it? I don't know. Maybe it does. Yes. Well, I guess you might say I was there at the beginning. In 2015, Al Beyer and Sally Spencer Thomas wrote an article for the Construction Financial Management Association, which I happened to be the CEO of at the time. I retired in 2023, so I was the CEO for about 13 years. And Al and Sally wrote an article that really started this whole initiative. We put this article in our Building Profits, and it was about, how to prevent construction suicide. And I always say there was a tsunami of activity after we printed the article. We have CFMA has a listserv where people can go in and communicate and talk to each other about various problems. And just people came out of the woodwork and wanted to talk about suicide and suicide prevention. Heard a lot of stories from people that we knew, and we had no idea suicide had touched them. So that really is what started it. And then things really took a turn. I don't know if you want to say for the better, for the worse, when a year later, the CDC came out, Center for Disease Control, came out with a study that said construction had the highest suicide rate of any industry. So we knew we had hit on something in 2015, the reaction to Cal and Sally's article, but we really recognized how important it was when we got the CDC results. So that was 2016. At that point in time, we realized very quickly this was much bigger than CFMA, a much bigger project. We tried to enlist the entire industry. We brought the industry together. And in 2018, we created CIASP as a 501c3. That's the short version. I could give you the long version, but I think you'd rather enjoy just the short version.
We're good.
That was good. That was just enough.
That was perfect. So, Stuart, this is our anniversary month. We came out with this podcast 1 year ago, April 2025.
Feels like yesterday.
It does feel like yesterday, Zulq.
Yeah.
As my people say, mazel tov.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we're excited. We're really excited about where we are. We put out 18 episodes in 2025. And our plan for 2026 is 2 episodes a month with maybe a bonus episode here and there.
So how many is that in a year, Sonia? I just want to see how
It'll be 20, 24, 25 total.
Just wanted to make sure she got the math
Checking
right.
my math off.
Yeah, that's all it was. Just a check on math.
So we really wanted to spend a little time at kind of doing a look back. We know that you are a aficionado of the podcast, that you listen pretty regularly.
Thank
so
you.
We appreciate that. Stuart's one of our downloads every month.
We have 6. One of them, Stuart.
That's not true. We have more than 6. Stop
Okay,
it.
good.
So what we really want to talk about, Stuart, is what over the last however many of the episodes that you caught, what were some of your favorites? But before you do that, I want to have Zulq guess, and then I'll take a guess, and let's see if we land on the same ones that we think are your favorites. Can you give us a little bit of a hint, though?
No.
No, don't give her a hint.
Okay. All right, Zulq, smarty pants.
I'm gonna go say when we did the Men's Health Month and we had a group of, can't remember the episode name. Sorry,
It was episode 4, and we broke it into
episode
2
number
parts.
4, where we had a group of guys that started off. The conversation was slow to start, but it was like, oh crap, this is the one day I wish this ended early. And we got into the conversation. It was really a bunch of guys that really reflected the industry that just poured their hearts out. So I'm gonna go with that one.
So I think that was Jason Scholl, Andrew Theokas, and Stephen Dumont, right? Am I right on that?
Even something.
I think
Yep.
so. Yep.
Whatever.
Yeah. So just Stuart, say I was right and just move on. Let's make this quick.
So there was, okay.
What's yours, Sonya?
I actually think my guess would be that I think it's going to be between 2. My guess is that it is the suicide prevention one with Michelle and Ismet, and I think it was Paul Lawson. No, Paul was not on that one. It was Michelle, Ismet, and I know who was on there. Nick DeJesse, who was from OSHA. So it's either that one or it's one with Cal. We did 2 with Cal. So it's either one of Cal's or it's the September one.
All right. So before I give away my answer, let me make some prefatory comments. So I didn't listen to all of them, but I listened to about half.
Fair.
And I think what impressed me, the conversations were very nuanced and in depth and way beyond what we were talking about 10 years ago. I mean, you've really gone into the corners and slivers of this issue in a way that I'm not sure I had ever envisioned. And I think the other thing is we've cultivated so many leaders and experts in this area. I mean, when we started this 10 years ago, you could probably count on your hands the number of people who understood it, knew anything about it, or could talk about it. And now every 2 weeks, you have somebody else talking about it and sometimes multiple people. So, I mean, I think that's amazing. That's really impressed. To me, while I will answer your question, the message I have gotten if you really want to be concise about what we've learned from all of these, it's communicate and listen. Those are the 2 words that come through in every single one of them. You know, we've come a long way, you know, equating this to physical safety. I equate this to the physical safety progress, which I'll talk about one of the podcasts that talked about that 20 years ago, physical safety was something that we you know couldn't get by, and now look where we are in terms of OSHA and the implementation of all that. So I see us kind of halfway through that process in that we're about 10 years into this discussion, and in 20 years I think it'll be mainstream. I mean, it already is mainstream. I knew we had hit this issue when ENR, Engineering News Record, had it as the lead story, and that was many years ago. I don't remember when it was, but I realized we had hit a chord, you know, when that happened. So the answer to your question is, and the answer to all my questions when it comes to this issue is Cal.
Of course.
You know, Cal's kind of my North Star. He's an amazing guy. He's so freaking authentic, and there's not an insincere ounce in Cal's body, and he just hits so many wonderful chords. The one on I think October 7th, it was the 11th issue. You know, he used his favorite word expression. I don't know if Cal came up with it but now everyone talks about breaking the stigma.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if Cal came up with that expression, but
We're gonna let him co-opt it for a while, but
we're going to let it because that's his. But the other thing he talked about in that session was about Narcan, and I thought that was very important because I go around the country, as you guys know, and I deliver presentations on behalf of CIASP to many, many contractors, and I always mention Narcan. I pull out my Narcan. I ask the audience what this is. About 50% of the audience knows what it is, and then we talk a little bit about it. But Cal talked about training for Narcan and how important that is. And it is important because I would say half the time when I talk to a company, they have Narcan on the site, and half the time they don't. And if they don't have it, it's because of fear of liability. And it's pretty standard. And I can't blame them, but the antidote is training.
100%, but it's no different than first aid on a job site. It wasn't really mandatory until about 15 to 20 years ago. And even then, all the people that did have first aid, they're like, oh yeah, I took it like 6 years ago. You're like, well, you haven't been refreshed. And then you open the first aid kit and you find out there's no bandages in it, and you close it and go, shit, they haven't even restocked it.
What I love about Narcan training too is that it's so simple It is simply lay, spray, stay. It's that easy to remember. And that you're not going to do harm. The way that Narcan works is that it attracts to the opioid receptors and it basically neutralizes the drug effects. It does not do any harm if the person is not going through a overdose. And so it's, while Good Samaritan laws apply, there's no downside to administering Narcan.
I should know the answer to this question, but do we have anything on our website that talks about the use of Narcan and how to use it appropriately?
We do not yet, although we are working very closely with a partnership to form a partnership with Safe Project. And so that's phase 2 of the website update.
Because I think creating a policy that companies can adopt, if we create that sample policy, I think that would be very helpful, because the only thing that's keeping companies from stocking this is that fear of liability.
Yeah,
That's the only thing.
I think there's twofold, Stuart. One is admitting that you might actually have a problem on the job site, right? Like, nobody wants to know the element of fit for duty, but the reality is, a human, for someone who's been on a job site where there's been basically a fatality, it does leave an impression on your brain that never ever erases itself. It's not one of those buttons you can't go hit delete. It's there forever. So for all those that are going to be listening to this, you can say, from a liability perspective, I shouldn't have done this. Or you can say, crap, do I really want that memory etched in my brain for the rest of my life, and how it's going to impact my day-to-day from that day forward? So there's no harm in doing it. And you know what? If somebody wants to sue you after the fact, most judges are going to laugh at that individual, say he saved your life or her life.
Well, the way I look at this, and when we started this initiative, I have been around the contracting world for 40 years. So I know contractors pretty well. And I knew that it was not going to be enough to be the do-gooders, to say this is the right thing to do. We had to create a business necessity. And just like we created a business necessity for talking about this, I would fit Narcan into the same category.
Completely agree.
That it's a business necessity, and the return on investment to train people to use Narcan far exceeds anything that it would cost you, because you're going to save lives, and you're not going to have a situation on the job site where the job's going to shut down. I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications when something like this happens. So the return on investment is pretty significant. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's also the right thing to do from a business standpoint.
I think what we're going to see, Stuart, now, especially with the latest data that came out that showed that there was a decrease, even though it was a small decrease in suicide prevention rates, but there was a significant decrease in overdose rates, and that is directly attributed to Narcan. And if we start to, I should say we continue to message that very clearly, then that will become very evident that it is the next phase in job site safety, right?
Mhm.
That we all should be stocking Narcan and making a difference with that.
I just want to interject for a second. Sonya, it's not the next stage. It's the current stage that you should be all working on.
Absolutely.
Don't be thinking it's the next stage. It's right up there with your eye wash station. It's right up there with your first aid and your bandages. And it's right up there, like, we're putting defibrillators on a job site for cardiac arrests, right? Depending on the size of the job site.
Yep.
We're training people how to use a defibrillator. And shit, that's hell of a lot more complicated than shooting something up somebody's nostrils.
Yep.
So I don't know that there's generally a fear about it. It's just, there's general ignorance. And you know what? That's part of the reason we have a podcast, is that we can have these open, candid conversations and say, hey, you know what? It's depending on where you are. I can tell you, in Canada, it's free. You just go to the pharmacy and they give it to you.
Well, I know Cal mentioned that it costs $35.
Yeah.
I guess if you're getting it over the counter. I'll tell you, I realized that Narcan was ubiquitous when I was at a high-end hotel in the suburbs of Maryland, near DC. And, they have these kiosks where you can buy deodorant, you can buy Band-Aids, and I almost passed out, but there was Narcan in that same kiosk. I was really surprised. So it really has become ubiquitous. There's no reason why, the ignorance has led to fear. Contractors need to understand the benefits. Now let me move on to my second point from the Cal podcast.
All right, tell more. Now, is this your favorite episode, or do you have more than one? Like, what are your top?
I have more than one, but I'm going to start with Cal.
Okay,
I mean, he's my North Star. So, he talks about recovery-friendly workplaces. Now, that to me is a much harder conversation and a much more complicated one, because I work currently with some construction companies, and we had an incident recently where they had to fire someone because they were drinking on the job and they were driving a company truck.
Mm.
And
In
that's doesn't
construction.
yeah,
Shocking.
that doesn't sound good for liability purposes either. So on the one hand, while I fully support this notion of recovery friendly workplaces, I think it's a pretty complicated issue when you're on the job site, when you're in a construction company. I don't have answers to that question, but I just note that it's more complicated than just adopting a recovery friendly workplace.
Yeah, as a business owner, it's a very complicated liability question. And when you have two people, I mean, you look at the cascading effect. It's only one extra person. When you have a company, 200, 300, 400 people, the cascading effect is huge. The unfortunate reality is on a business level, you'll say, "Hey, I don't need this to be part of my subculture in my organization. I'm going to ixnay it out like it was cancer."
Exactly.
The flip
Exactly.
side of that is I think with the whole idea of recovery safe workplaces, recognizing that mental health is usually part of the reason why there is a substance abuse and really making it comfortable for people to say, "Hey, listen, I need help. I could get help." And that's why the recovery friendly places are a little bit more apt to saying, "Hey, listen, we're not going to shun you because you've recognized you have a problem."
Well, I think
Right.
you've got that recovery has got to come before an incident. So you go to the
Yeah,
EAP.
the incident is kinda like the cherry on the sundae.
Yeah.
However, some people will admit from listen, I'm gonna say this, we're not I'm now in the technology space of construction, and we have a young person who's working with us as a co-op student that is, having a hard time with school and everything else, and we had to internally deal with the situation because they overdosed.
So sorry.
And luckily, this is not the individual's first attempt. This is their fifth. And it's a young person, a fantastic human being, just lost and reached out after she got out of a little bit of rest stay and said, "I'm too embarrassed to talk to anyone now." And I said, "No, don't be embarrassed. You're in a safe spot.
Mm.
Mhm.
We're all here to support you,
It's amazing.
right? We understand you didn't like either got other factors that are influencing what happened at work. And I didn't have to, one of the things I tried to help the individual with was to say, "Hey, listen, I'm not saying just for me, all of your coworkers and peers that you feel like you failed them on, just tell them this is what happened. And I
Mhm.
absolutely assure you, there's a high probability they're going to comfort you and support you in it." And the effect was, is it a safe working place? It's a safe recovery place. They had an incident.
Mhm.
They got here. And when the individual reached out to the people they were reporting into, because they're working with the marketing and the digital team, they're like, "Oh my God, okay, hey, listen, let's pretend like we're going to discuss that. We're going to give you a safe spot. We can do one-on-one through Zoom. Do you want to meet in the office? Come and have some fun. Just bring the situation down to earth." And I got to thank you at the end saying, "Thank you. I thought it was going to be harder. This is a young person,
Yeah.
right? Was forget the reasons why it happened, was too ashamed and embarrassed of how to fix the problem. But we as an employer, these are things I'm learning from Sonya and you and everyone else. Say, hey, safe places, right?
And I mean, I think it's a difficult conversation when you have somebody who's not in at the office, but's on the job site and is running vehicles, something like that.
Yeah,
Those
but
are
the
those are
reality is
difficult conversations.
the
And like I
reality
It's
is
said,
tough
the same.
conversations, but I think there's a place for someone to be able to say, I mean, we all know that in many cases in the recovery journey, you have to hit a point where either you've had an incident or you feel like you're at the bottom to be able to say it's time to start getting help. And having a place like Zulq described as that safe place to come forth and say, like, I'm struggling and I need help, but I also need my job because I can't get the help if I don't have insurance. And if I don't have insurance, I'm not going to be in a position to take care of this or myself. But knowing that that job is still there for them and that there's something to look towards to return to is a goalpost. But you're right, it is a very nuanced conversation when you are looking at heavy equipment and machinery and vehicles and all of the things that go into the high pressure that is already existing in
Yeah,
construction.
and if they're an equipment operator, they're a vehicle operator. There's still other opportunities for them to earn.
Right, you can move them
sure.
to
Part
some
of the safe
yeah.
place. It says, okay, you listen, we recognize there's a problem. Are you taking the steps to get help to prevent this? And by the way, we're taking you off of somewhere where you can cause more damage to other human beings, right? Damage to physical property. I'm going to always say it. Property doesn't have feelings. Cars don't have feelings, right? Wrecking a boom on an excavator doesn't have feelings. Killing someone, yeah, it's got some feelings attached
I'll
to it
tell
all.
you who does this really well is Michelle Walker at SSC, who is
Yeah.
on our board, has
Awesome
been
person.
a proponent of additional chance agreements for a very long time and does a
Mhm.
really great job at creating that safe workplace, that culture of care, but also executing this in a way that allows the company to stay safe and the employee to feel safe at the
100%.
same.
And that's the point I was trying to make is you've got to find that, if you can feel like you have a problem and go to the EAP and address it before you have an accident, that's probably a lot easier for a company than once the accident's taken place. That was really the main point I was trying to make.
Yeah,
I want to
exactly.
preface that a little bit. Knowing that you have an EAP is step one. Like you should take advantage of it. Most
Mhm.
individuals will not take advantage of their EAP program.
Correct.
And if you as an employer don't have an EAP program, think about it.
Well, absolutely. It's one of the things I raise every single time I talk. And I would say about 25% of people realize that their company has an EAP. I
Yeah.
know one of the most meaningful conversations I had was after I'd done a presentation in Dallas. I got a phone call the next day. The guy said, I just want you to know you really made a difference in a couple people's lives. And I said,
Nice.
how's that? He said, they didn't know we had an EAP. They came up to me afterwards after you spoke and they said, I need some help from the EAP. So
Fantastic.
that's the kind of thing that, really makes you feel good about what we do. Moving on.
Yeah. Tell us more, Stuart.
So the next one is the next episode, number 12, with Nick Williams and Cal. And I just have a couple of pithy little quotes that I liked from that one.
All right.
Uh, I think Nick talked about courageous conversations.
Mhm.
And the one quote I wrote down, I think this is very heavy and very accurate about today. Transactional leaders are likely to fail as being transformational leaders. I thought that was great. I think, when I look back on my career, I was not the easiest guy to get along with. As
Really?
we, shocker, as we've discussed in this personality assessment profile that I'm fond of using,
Color?
a certain color, but it's a certain personality. I wouldn't say I was always transactional, but I was certainly about getting the work done and getting it done well, and probably not displaying a lot of emotion on the job site. I realized at the end of my career, I was more effective at the end of my career when I kind of showed a little feeling and put a hand out to the people in the company that it made a difference. And I think that's not easy for transactional leaders. So maybe the kind of leader we need in today's day and age is a little different than what we had before.
They're already happening. I mean, if you're living in a transactional state, you've outlived your era.
On to number 4, Men's Health Month.
Did I make it?
What's that?
I'm in the top 4.
You were in the running, and so Sonya. So you both won. Okay. I don't know how I know you guys like to compete. Maybe you'll have to figure out, who
She's
gets the
still a
higher
little chocolate.
award, but I'll let you figure that out. This one, what it focused on was, the importance of communication training. And it said, we should make communication training part of our standard operating procedures. Like, every company has SOPs, but do we have SOPs for communication training? No, no, it's the soft skills, and people somehow think those soft skills are less important. But I think it brought home to roost. Women have built in a communication SOP. Don't, and I think that's a huge difference. And when I talk about this issue all the time,
Okay.
when we look at the reasons why construction has such a high suicide rate, for me, to me, the number one is stoic mentality, the male stoic mentality. That's just my observation. Why is that my observation? I'm in front of 100 guys, maybe 4 women and 95 guys, and you see the guys with their arms crossed, and they're looking at you like, okay, what in God's name do you have to say that is of any interest to me? And I see it all the time. I don't see guys leaning in to, want to ask questions. I see guys leaning backwards and going, how do I get out of this? And I see it every time I speak. I see that stoic mentality, and I know it's not good for them or for the industry. I think I've told both of you this story. I was talking to a bunch of home builders in Georgia, and one of the company home builders said to me, he said, I've learned something recently. It's changed my life. And I said, what's that? He said, I learned to cry. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, your head's, it's like a top. It's gonna pull. You're going to rip your top off of your head if you don't get rid of some of that stress. And I found out that crying really reduced my stress. And so it's that stress and the stoic mentality. You put those two together, that is not a recipe for success. That is a recipe for mental health problems. So I thought that was very insightful. All right, moving along. Let's see.
Who's hosting this podcast today?
I'm
Did
okay
you-
with it. You carry on, Stuart.
Did
But
you
let's
expect,
suck aside,
Sonya,
buddy.
when you invited me, did you expect otherwise?
I really didn't. No.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, this should not be a surprise. I also did my homework, see, so I want to
that. Thank you.
I want to get credit for my homework.
You will. Gold star.
So this one was September, I think it was number 9. It was postvention, but they didn't really talk a lot about postvention. But what they did talk about is what I led in at the beginning of what I said, talking about psychological safety versus physical safety. And OSHA acceptance probably took 20 years. We need to think of psychological safety in the same way. We're not there yet, but I think we're moving forward. I think that's very important to think about. And then there's that other part of this, which is safety pays. And physical safety pays just probably more so than, psychological safety pays probably more than physical safety. So it's
Sure.
good. It's good business. Where am I at? 1214, Ted Marr.
Yeah.
Once again, another expression I really liked. Every mentor is a leader, but not every leader is a mentor. I thought that was a great expression. Culture is not built in meetings, but in moments.
I will say, interestingly enough, when Zulq and I were talking about who was coming up and who we were about to record with, Zulq and I had a back and forth via text about why Ted was coming on this podcast. Was he the right guest for us? How does this relate to construction? And I would venture to guess, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I think Zulq was pleasantly surprised by the content and the conversation with Ted. And he's such a great guy, too. I've known Ted for many years. We have worked together a few times, and he just brings such a down-to-earth piece of conversation about why mentoring is so important. And I know I've been lucky enough to have some really great mentors, so it's a concept I believe in really deeply.
Yep. All right. That's my list.
Am I right, Zulq? Were you kind of questioning Ted there?
Hey, listen, I have to question
Please.
everything you do, Sonya. Like, I won't lie to you.
I know, but can we also admit that I'm fairly often right?
I don't think you're going to get that, Sonya.
It was Stuart.
Knowing Zulq and knowing myself, you're not getting that from us very often.
No, you're not getting that off. Listen, we already have wives at home. We don't need a work wife. Like, that's just.
But the thing is,
need a work husband.
The thing is, Sonya, when you do get a compliment from us, you know it's very genuine.
I do. And I will say that after Stuart was listening to the podcast, I did get a text message from him saying he was very impressed, which was high praise, because I would have heard if he wasn't.
That is true.
So here is my penultimate question.
Oh my God, my favorite word.
I
Nice
know.
going.
Thank
Oh
you.
my God.
Thank you very much.
Well done.
Who would be your dream guest on this podcast?
Well, you already had Cal, but I think like a real dream guest would be some kind of celebrity whose father or mother was an electrician or a plumber. And so they came from a family in the construction industry and saw what their parent had to deal with and have learned from them maybe how to de-stress, or how they became famous because they learned all about hard work. I'm thinking like, if LeBron's dad was a electrician, or if, Brad Pitt's father was a HVAC guy, something like that. That would be an interesting.
Okay.
Okay, well, now you're looking for a needle in a haystack. We'll go looking.
Well,
Sonya, that's your job to do, because you're so talented and you're so awesome. Can you search for that person on LinkedIn?
I can.
Sonya told me to look for a big, hairy, audacious goal. So that's how I ended
BHAG.
up in that category.
BHAG.
Who would be your penultimate guest?
Mine? Wow. Yeah, I don't know.
Living or dead? Let's go with that. Like, if you could have
living or
anyone,
dead, I would have wanted Robin Williams.
okay.
Because
And I always wanted to interview Jackie Kennedy.
Well,
I
that's
just
a
wanted
different,
to know
that's a
the
different
stories of
conversation. I
Jackie
feel like,
Kennedy.
Yes,
Stuart.
well, hey, I just thought we'd go off on a tangent.
Yeah, like, but she liked people with hair on their backs and their heads. You know, Stuart, you had a chance there. I would want to
anymore.
know why I would want to know why a guy who spent the bulk of his career making someone laugh, like why couldn't he be happy too? So that people really realize that inner soul of the individual.
But
Because
there's a lot of comedians who aren't happy.
I mean, there's musicians that sing about happy songs and they get shot to death. You're like, whoa. But yeah, Robin Williams, I would say, kind of basically from an era and a growing up, like that was like, what? Why were you, what? Right? Like, you know, if Charlie Chaplin did it, I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me because it was Charlie Chaplin, right?
Sure.
But Robin Williams, for me, from an age perspective, growing up, watching his movies, stuff like that.
Okay, so here's some fun facts because while you two were talking, I did a quick Google search. Arnold Schwarzenegger, bricklayer. Sean Connery.
No, he lifted bricks.
Mm-mm.
I don't think he laid
Bricklayer, like union bricklayer. Sean Connery, a cement mixer. Harrison
can see
Ford, carpenter. I don't know who this is. Bob Odenkirk, who is a comedian, I guess, was a construction laborer turned comedian.
Okay.
Rod Stewart, laborer for laborer.
She
Whoopi
should have won.
Goldberg, bricklayer before she won her EGOT. Whoopi Goldberg, before she became an EGOT winner. Yep.
Okay, so I will send Whoopi Goldberg an email. I'll find a way to get her an email or her agents an email and say, hey, would you like to be on the I mean, that'd be cool.
I mean, it's certainly.
Was she going to say no?
I think that, yeah, I mean, we have lots of options here. So if you were going to ask me for my own, much like Stuart's quest for Jackie Kennedy, I would say that Matthew McConaughey would be my dream guest. I am sure we could find a connection to construction.
Odenkirk, you know, if you don't know him, it's very well. It's actually
by the way.
I don't know Odenkirk.
And for the benefit of everyone that's going to be viewing on this, Sonya thinks Batman was sexy.
Certain Batman, but that is not the point.
I just said Batman was sexy. I'm just okay.
Okay.
We got
all right. Let's move that along.
All right.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for that. So, final thoughts. Just as we get close to wrapping this up, I would love to hear what feels like it is something you want to tell our listeners.
I think what I'd like to tell our listeners is we've come a hell of a long way in 10 years. I'm super proud of how we started. We had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what the nature of the extent of the problem was. We attacked it. I'm very proud of what CFMA did because it was not exactly on our strategic plan for a bunch of accountants to be talking about suicide prevention. But we pivoted very quickly when it became an issue, and I got a lot of support from our board, from our officers. Nobody flinched. They said, no, this is the right thing for us to do. And so I think that's a great lesson for everybody. Sometimes you have to veer off your strategic plan and focus on something that hits you right in the face and you realize needs to be addressed. That's what we did. And I'm very proud of what we did there.
And on behalf of the construction industry, Stuart, thank you for you guys taking that bold initiative to start the dialogue, because we're only here today because people like you that were sitting in positions that said, oh my God, we actually have a real problem and let's openly discuss it. So on behalf of the construction ecosystem, thank you very much, Stuart, and all of your colleagues that got this going and this momentum.
Thank you, Zulq.
And thank you, Stuart. It was definitely a hard conversation. Now, I would like you to reprise one of your famous quotes. You quoted a couple of our fellow warriors in this conversation, but why is this important, or why was this important to the Construction Financial Management Association? What's that quote you have about the assets of a construction company?
Yes. So, you know, a CFO is in charge of really managing all the resources of a construction company. And what's the most important resource a company has is its people. So that is why I was always able to hang the hook that this is something not only we should do, but we have to do.
Yeah. We have a finite supply and people don't understand that. There's more oil than we have workers.
Yeah. Yep.
So with that, we'll sign off for today. Thank you, Stuart, for being part of our anniversary episode. And thank you for all you've done for the industry. We appreciate you.
Thanks, folks. Great to be with you.
Everyone.
Bye, Sonya.
Bye.